text and stuff like that. So I guess it was engaging. They wanted to know more. They liked the idea of it was to involve a gift of some kind. So the human companion gave the robot a learning module, and they're reading stage directions also. And stage directions say he stares at it for a minute, and then he goes on to talk about all he's learned because it's that quick, because he's
right.
And they like that, and so they like some stuff. And then later, after I got all the feedback, and I told them that I in fact had not written it, I had taken the prompt for the play and put it into an AI bot, and it had in fact written it. And then I asked it to inject some humor. It rewrote a couple lines, and that was what I'd submitted. And the lady who moderates the playwright forum, she said, so in the future, when I send out prompts, I have to put must be human written. And I said, not necessarily. If it can write ones that people like, I mean, I'm not going to use it to write one in the future, but if people can, hey, why not? People, we've seen bots win Hemingway contests, writing, in the form of Ernest Hemingway. So why not? If it's good content, it really doesn't matter how you got it. You heard me, Google. But
another great soundbite.
Well, welcome everyone to another episode of SEO Fight Club. Hope everyone had a good week. It's been an interesting one for me. I've been trying to get the Cora 7.3 beta into good shape, and I plan to release new beta links after the show. I just got to finish up the PC installer. And then we're doing cool stuff. So a lot of great discoveries in Chat GPT, and seen a number of cool innovations in that direction. I know a lot of tools are scrambling to integrate, including Cora. If you want to see all of my SEO prompts, I provide them all in a preset menu in the Chat GPT tool. And I have to say, my biggest criticism so far of this technology is the branding. Like, they totally flubbed the name and made it not conversational. The cool thing about like Google's branding is it became conversational just naturally. Did you Google it? But when you create a brand and you call it like, what Microsoft did, live search, it's no longer conversational. Like, you feel like a jackass saying, did you live search it? And with Chat GPT, the same thing is true. It's like hard to say. It's easy to mess up. You don't sound cool saying it. They messed up the branding on it. So I hope they rebrand at some point so that it's easier to talk about. But it's easy enough to write about and easy enough to use. So the technology is great, but their marketing department needs a little help. So start flooding them with offers to take over their marketing, because they're dropping the ball on it. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, I think that, it is a hard one to say. When you just said that, I just went over to Namecheap real quick, and there's stop the echo there. Okay. So yeah, I went over to Namecheap real quick, and I said, I wonder if something like Chatly was available. Well, it was registered in 2000, but they need something like, I was working with Chatly the other day, whatever you need something that is, it is brandable, and it's a lot easier to say than Chat GPT, because, and I understand it's a beta, but they definitely need a brand. So it becomes easier to talk about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, it's interesting, and I see people like flooding the market trying to get chat GPT related domain names. And I think long term this might be a mistake, because keep in mind, in the world of prompts, there's a lot more than just chat GPT. So there's all the image prompts, there's all the synthetic voice technologies coming out. There's so many different AI technologies, and they're all kind of prompt based. And so, I kind of think people are missing the mark on going after the GPT domains when they probably should go for the more generic agnostic prompt domains. But speculators gonna speculate. That's what they do.
That's true.
So yeah, I had a number of discussions with people starting startup companies in the area of chat GPT services, interfaces, and things of that nature. And it's really interesting. There's a few of them that are going after funding. The ideas are so good. So, I really recommend that you learn these tools. And if you are an inventor and you're looking for something to invent, this is an excellent playground. Excellent playground. I've been experimenting with this interesting capability where I can get the AI to provide me what it knows about things in a detailed data kind of way. And so I can get all these characteristics and classifications and, all these types of labels of things and attributes of things, and I can compile it on a term by term basis into this data dump. So it's like you can actually do these crazy things where you can make ontologies and taxonomies and glossaries and data sets and very impressive things that you wouldn't normally think to ask the AI. And so I'm already down a rabbit hole in a different direction than anybody else is using it for, and it can do it. It does have a lot of problems. Like the most common thing is people start asking me, Ted, how long will it be before the AI can tune the text for me? I just tell it what standard I want and it rewrites it. It cannot do that in its current state. The current problem is it can't count. It's really bad at math. It understands the concept. If you ask it, do you know how to apply a keyword density to a body of text, it'll give you the correct answer on how to do it. But when it goes to apply it, you'll say, give me a 600 word paragraph and say keyword 19 times, and it's going to give you a 300 word paragraph and it'll say keyword 9 times. And then you can right after it say, how many times did you write the keyword in the paragraph you just wrote? And it'll say 19 times because it knows contextually that was the answer you wanted, but that's not what it did. So it's not connecting what it's doing and what it did with your request. But if you ask follow-up questions, it'll mine the correct answer out of your request in the context. And so because of that, you get bad tuning.
Well, in all fairness, that's not what it was designed to do. I mean, it was designed to look at, relationships between terms and ideas. And, the training set determines what it knows. So it knows that, coffee and mug and espresso and all those things are, a family of related terms, and it can write content on that. But it doesn't understand SEO optimization because that's not what it was trained to do. So, I remember when the first AI writers came out, that was one of the complaints was, okay, so it writes this content, but it won't SEO optimize. It doesn't rank. I was like, well, it wasn't designed to write SEO optimized content, and it's still not there yet, but eventually somebody will build that capability.
Yeah, the other thing, like if you're building tools and you want to go in that direction, my advice to you is you use the AI to make the content piece, but any math you're doing, you need to manage outside of the AI, and you probably want to stitch your content together incrementally, and you change the nature of what you're asking for so you drift towards the right tunings. And I would see things like that working. But at the same time, I also wonder if it's needed. And there's a new type of factor I think I'm starting to see in the whole ecosystem. And if it isn't there, if it's my imagination, I kind of predict it's going to go that way anyway, naturally. So I've talked in the past about the information payload of content. And I'm starting to see that when I have a aggressively tuned page, it performs to a certain level. But then when I get a really dense bulk amount of information payload that's topically relevant, and I add that to the page, it seems to have a profound effect. So it's like I discovered a class of missing factors, which is like the number of informational statements from a body of content and informational statement density. And it's kind of proving out that getting the right amount of entities and keyword density and things like that on the page is a big part of the puzzle, but there may be a payload component. And we kind of saw that with the helpful content when we started seeing informational snippets show up in search. I mean, how hard would it be for Google to count informational snippets on a page? So we know they're parsing them. We know they can do them. They show them in search results. How hard would it be for them to count them? So it's totally possible, and it's totally being demonstrated in search today as we see it. So now we got to start thinking about that information payload in the content as well. And that begs the question, how do we measure it? How do I make a factor for it? So that's kind of where my headspace is going now, is how do I quantify informational payload of a body of content?
Cool. So I see we need to shift over to our presentation today because I'm excited about this one.
Oh, yeah. We have Carolyn presenting. It's gonna be about indexation. So Carolyn, take it away.
Excellent. Thanks, guys. So I guess oops, hang on. Little technical difficulty. Okay. These are your slides, Ted. So yes, Confessions of an SEO. That's continuing season 3. And so this week, I'm not sure what the topic's going to be, but last week I talked a little bit about, it's SEO community. How much do we sort of scare ourselves, with constantly trying to keep up with things. So not quite sure how to go after that one. Yeah, and I guess this is Clint's show. Is he here?
I think he was going to drop in later. I think he was on a call or something.
Got it. Okay. So his show's on Mondays, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So today's Tuesday. Sorry about that.
Yeah. His show's.
So,
oh, sorry. I was just going to say his show's great if you want tactical advice, if you need an expert to look at a problem. Highly recommend it. Great resource.
wait for a little delay. So in terms of revisiting this, because back in August 2021, we had kind of had a year where we were having a lot of trouble with indexation, and a lot of people had answers as to why that was so, and it was all on our side. You know, you did it wrong, is basically how it was presented. And so last year, February, is pretty much where we came up with the revised protocol, like don't do what Google tells you to do, and go through the search console and hit the indexation request button. That this is where we kind of had the confirmation that the API, Google Indexing API, was the way in, and don't worry so much about Search Console. So now, and this is why, because obviously we're getting a much higher percentage of indexation.
So let me just make sure, let's back up on that one just a second, just to make sure everybody understands this. Because there's a lot of information on there, and you've gone over some of this before. So what you're saying is, when you went through, if you had a new piece of content and I went into Search Console and I clicked request indexing, I got an 8% indexation rate. And if I took the same new content and I went through the indexing API, I got 100% indexation.
That's how the testing worked out. Yes.
Yeah. So your conclusion was basically that it was almost like going through Search Console to request indexing for new content was almost like a negative signal or just a pointless act.
It was like the devil's triangle. Yeah. It's kind of like shipwrecks everywhere, and nobody was safe.
Okay. And you're getting ready to say, now this is changing again.
Yes.
Okay, cool.
And you know, basically I did this is just a rehash of how I tested to find out and confirm. You know, previously it was the Google Indexing API and not through Search Console. And so in January, I turned off the Google Indexing API, and I was asking myself, why would I do this? And primarily, I noticed starting on December 12th that when you would use API, the bot behavior changed. And I don't think, at least as far as new content was concerned, it was very challenging to get anything new indexed in December. For my testing and in other ways, I was noticing that it was different. Something changed. And so I started some other test sites, and I was using these new test sites, but content using the request through the Search Console was getting in, that new content was getting indexed. And I was like, oh, wow, this is great. But I couldn't figure out why some sites were getting indexation and some were not. So I jumped down that rabbit hole, which was why I'm using the same crappy content. I'm not, using different sources of content. I mean, it wasn't identical content. It was just identically generated content.
So are you saying that in December with those particular test sites, with your equally crappy content, that some domains were getting high indexation using Search Console and some weren't getting anything with Search Console?
Correct.
Okay. All right.
And this perplexed me and vexed me. So I started looking at the different sites and found one thing that was different. And this was discovered in Search Console, where the ones with the primary desktop crawler were the ones that were not getting indexed. And the ones with primary crawler smartphone or mobile, they were getting indexed. That was the only difference I could find. So I started testing with these sites, kind of like doing every other day. And what I noticed, what the bot did differently, is that through the Search Console request button, that would send a bot that behaved more like the indexing API request used to. And it would, when you submit that request, it goes to the robots text file first, pulls that, and then we'll do a complete discovery rendering crawl using the mobile bots. And it goes through the normal page, I guess the way Search Console describes your page, like it says, we don't know it at all. You know, get out of here. We've never seen this before. To we've crawled it, we haven't indexed it yet. To okay, we've indexed it. And then approximately 2 days later, between 24 and 48 hours later, it would be findable by both of the test keywords, the simple one and the JavaScript. So that sound good?
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I'm trying to now just try and figure out, what happened in December, because it's very possible that maybe that was fix the Search Console indexation request month. And they've done it for mobile primary crawler. And the difference with the desktop primary crawler is that it also goes through that same step of we don't know it, to we've crawled it, we haven't indexed it, to we've indexed it, but it is not being served. So it's kind of like almost like building up some kind of backlog, I guess, until I don't know if this is a test. I don't know what's going on, but that is the difference, is that for my life, I cannot get the content, new content on a primary desktop crawled site findable. So the test that I did, actually, it says 14 tests, but remember there's, I think I was talking about the mobile on that one, that it's actually, as of today, it's now 16 out of 16 tests. 16, which is like 8 simple keywords and 8 JavaScript keywords. On the desktop site in the last 2 weeks, I had 2 test pages, one that showed up for the simple and one that showed up for the JavaScript. And the simple has disappeared. So it's gone out again.
Okay.
And so basically, I wanted to kind of because everybody said oh, don't use the Search Console. And I've been telling people not to do that for a year. So, but I think now is the time, if you have a primary mobile crawled site, have at it. It takes about 24 hours to show index in Search Console. And then another, typically 24 to 28 hours to be findable by the keywords. And if you're modifying content, it's very quickly. It's within 24 hours.
Where in Search Console would somebody look to see if they're being primarily crawled mobile or desktop? Do you have to look at an individual page, for example, or?
No, it's, if you go in there and on the left-hand side, it'll say indexing or index pages. Click on the pages and it will show you on the new page, like that graph of how many pages are indexed, how many are not. And above that on the right-hand side, it'll tell you. It'll say,
okay, so I'm looking at a particular site that I've recently launched, and it's got the bad news desktop one. How do I change that?
Well, you didn't assign it. Google assigns it. And that's the question I want to put out to the community. If anybody knows what makes that designation, it doesn't seem to be new domains or old domains. I think in the early things I was looking at this, that was one prevalent thing, but I went through all the domains that I had purchased and set up in Search Console. And it didn't matter when I bought them. It didn't matter. I couldn't find any kind of thing that said, okay, well, if you do it this way, it's always going to be mobile. If you do it this way, it's always going to be smartphone. So I don't know. It could, and again, that's why I'm just hoping that we open a conversation, that we can find out if anybody knows anything or notices anything. But I do not know of any way you can change it. Now, this might be into that mobile first indexing conversation they've been having for a couple of years. So that would be another possibility, that this is part of that, and that eventually they will move all of them over into smartphone. I don't know.
So have you tried looking at, for those desktop ones, you know, where you've got that impressive 2 for 12 or now 1 for 12, running back to the indexing API to see if that's still a viable, you know, if it's indexing API for one version and, you know, Search Console for the other, or is that testing not been done yet?
Well, I do have content where I am trying to do that, and I'm not seeing the same bot behavior that I'm seeing on successful indexation and findability.
Okay.
So it could change, but I just, you know, after 2 weeks of testing, I just felt like it was time to say, like, okay, this is now always, you know, I think even Simon brought up the idea of, you know, is anybody really having any problems with this? Because if you already have content indexed, it's always been faster to get that, any revisions to existing content.
Mhm.
So that's why I was focusing on new content, because that seemed to be where the challenges were, you know, for us as testers, because we're constantly trying to get new
Right.
content in there. So
This is interesting because I'm actually yesterday purchased 10 domains to set up some tests. And it'd be interesting to see which way Google goes. Are they all desktop? Are they all mobile? Or do they split in some fashion? I'll keep an eye on that. I'll let you know what happens with that.
that'd be great. Thanks.
Yeah, and let's see, in November of last year, I needed a new website for a conference I'm speaking at, and so I went and got a domain, a new domain, and it's a new keyword I've never worked with before. And I had a simple recipe, which was do a press release it before I even wrote any HTML. So I haven't even set up DNS yet, haven't gotten hosting, haven't made a single web page. Wrote the press release first. And then from there, I did the Cora tuning as per Lee's training, and did that in a day. And then it was ultimately just waiting 3 weeks. And then when I popped in, I was #1 Bing, #1 Google. But it took about 3 weeks for the whole system to do everything it needed to do. And I imagine that the bulk of that was waiting for Google to crawl the internet and to discover the backlinks and things of that nature. And I wonder more and more about the subsystems, like, you know, trying to do helpful content analysis and trying to compare it against their known training set of web spam, and creating a fuzzy indicator of how spammy a page might look based on that training set. And all of these types of things take time, and we know they're subsystems, and we know some of them happen once or twice a year, some of them just happen out of band. How much of what we're seeing in terms of going from, you know, being cached to Google claiming we're indexed to being findable, you know, what do you think there's like any possibility that some types of sites might have it harder or easier based on these subsystems? I mean, what are your thoughts? I'm just thinking out loud here.
You know, that 3 week time frame, I mean, it almost sounds like, you know, how we always said for the time for backlinks to take effect, you know, 2 to 3 weeks. So that's really interesting. Like, I wonder if we can influence even like how the site is designated. If we do that, that might be.
Yeah, and it raised an interesting question for me. So if you're an SEO tester and you're looking for something interesting to test, I'll give you this idea. Please just, share your results with me privately. So, because I'm very eager to learn. Send a press release to a non-existent website, and then create the URL, create the content, and see how Google responds to it, and then do it the other way. Create a new website, create the content, get it indexed, then do a press release. And are there differences in how Google treats it? Is there a concept of, priming the site beforehand versus trying to get the change made, after Google's already aware and watching? And so I think that there probably is a difference in those two contexts. And I would be really impressed if somebody brought research on it. And I know I need to do more testing. It's just that's not going to happen anytime soon. So if some kind tester out there is looking for a test to run, I think that one would be pretty amazing. And it might end in a best practice. You might always want to prime before you code. What do you think, Clint? Do you think there's a possibility that priming a page with backlinks or traffic before the page exists might make any sense at all?
I mean, it works with citations and maps, right? So you can build a whole bunch of citations, and then either the map will miraculously appear because of the systems, or it's easier to get it verified. So the theory that it would pass over for organic and sound.
Yeah, and I've seen hints of a subsystem in Google that's looking to fill opportunities it can't address easily. And so I'd imagine that if you created some amount of believable demand for an imaginary thing, and then all of a sudden a page shows up that meets that demand well, that Google would be eager to put you in that spot. And I can't prove it, but I have seen issues where Google would go against the tuning of my page to try to fill a demand void for something that was way out on the fringe of the page. And then I had to remove that fringe in order to get my target keyword to work. And once I did, it's like, boom, off to the races. And so whatever it is on that back end that said, well, let's ignore what the page is about because we have a real need for this mention you made, over in the bottom right. That's the big thing we want to position you for. Whatever that subsystem is, that's the thing I think we're kind of poking at this point. And yeah, I want to learn more about it for sure. And I'll have you know that when Google plays that, let's put you in a place we have a need for versus what you are trying to rank for, I can only diagnose that from Google Search Console. You can only see it in your queries, and you'll get like tons of impressions for things you are not tuned for and you are not trying to rank for, and it's obvious that they're wrong. When you see that in Search Console, that's kind of the diagnostic indicator that you may have been impacted by this, finding the best opportunity subsystem.
Ted, going back to that thing you were talking before about priming the pump, it got me to thinking that Google has said that sometimes they find content based on traffic to the content.
Yep.
And and I'm wondering if that's maybe like a a side effect, I guess, of the safe search, right? Like they know where everybody's going and they're like, what is this page? And I think in hindsight, discovered that to be true for like one of the pages I had done. I did not submit it or anything like that. And all of a sudden it was indexed and findable. And I was like, how did that happen? That was a while back, but that might be what plays a part in that, you know, it kind of like leaves a little echo. And then as you fill it in, it finds it and serves it.
Yep. And you know, we don't know much about the subsystems that Google has. I know there was a search engine roundtable article last year where they talked about the official names of things, and they kind of listed 15 or 20 of them. And I was like, oh my God, it's a payload. Here's, you know, something out of Google listing subsystems that they have. It's like it was Christmas come early. But I'm sure that list was far from complete. But the interesting thing is that we do have solid evidence that these subsystems exist. Like we know that the image OCR processing is a subsystem that runs on its own timetable. And Lee, I believe you were saying that one at times is as slow as 10 months.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of different, you know, that get delayed. You know, everything that Google does out there, you know, breaks down into data feeds and data warehouses where it gets processed on some timeline, and you know, those factors get updated in the algorithm, and sometimes it's slow. You know, the premise that we've had for a couple of years now is that Google's struggling with scale. And when you're struggling with scale, you know, sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes you have to put certain data feeds on the back burner. So, and, you know, some of the things that Carolyn and others have pointed out about, you know, Search Console and sort of the bots and their behaviors is certainly consistent with some problems with scale. So.
Yep. So, Carolyn, is there more?
I don't think so. I did these over the weekend.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's just primarily like where I'm focusing now is like how to get them to where they're indexed and served is the next piece. So
Excellent. Then we'll switch over and do some Q&A. I noticed that there's a number of questions coming up. One caught my eye. What's the general consensus right now about AI content? Good, bad, use, don't use? I'll tell you right now, I'm ranking stuff left and right with AI content. That's just the fact of the matter is it works, it indexes. Now, I'll tell you, there are some caveats, though. If you ask a basic question, you will get a basic answer. And right now, millions of people are asking basic questions, and they're all copying and pasting the exact same basic answer onto their page. This concept will create a lot of duplicate content. So you have to be very artful in how you ask for AI content so that it is unique and will stand up well against, you know, basic AI detection methods. And there are a number of places that tell you how to defeat those tools with crafting your prompts. So I would recommend that you go and read the research on those, watch some videos on those. But in general, you know, I'm liking it a lot. Like, you know, I know what I want to say, and I know that the internet knows more than I know about it. So I kind of get a better authoritative resource to like pull it all together, and then I can tweak it into the message I actually want to send. and the AI has my back. It's using proper grammar, it's writing at the level I want to write at, it's using a voice I'd like to use, and to be honest, putting that level of thought into everything I write is not something I do well. Like, I spend a lot of time in code and doing customer support, and so it's really hard to stop my brain and say, okay, now let's think about the voice I want to speak in and start writing some text. Like, that is not a skill that everybody possesses, definitely to different degrees. And so, yeah, I've found it to be fantastic. Now, would I use it to create a website that has 45,000 pages on it? I know a lot of people are rushing to do that, and I think that might be a little silly. But, if it helps you make your blog more engaging, if it helps you keep up with it so that you have good updates and new news, and your visitors like that, they come back more often for it, isn't that better than just letting your blog languish and stagnate? If you like the idea of curating information and presenting it well for others and explaining things and learning new things, I think this AI content is awesome. And anybody that tells you it's bad or wrong, I just think they don't understand it.
Yeah. I think I'm going to just blatantly steal from Clint right here, because it's a good source. Every time Google announces something, like if they announce today that they're rolling out the Top Hat update, and the Top Hat update is designed to do the following good things, tomorrow you will start to see articles telling you what you need to do to be Top Hat compliant. And there's no fucking way that you're going to know between today and tomorrow exactly how Top Hat or anything else is being implemented. The same thing is true of AI content. We do not know at this point. There is no data out there that suggests that Google is monitoring AI content in any organized fashion. And if they are, the detectors that are out there, like Glitter and Hummingbird and some of the others that are being built, we don't know if Google's utilizing those technologies to measure it either. So anybody that authoritatively tells you that here's how to avoid Google detection is bullshit right now, because you don't know that there is any detection or how it's being used. You just see people saying, hey, my site got hit, I used some AI content, therefore. And that's not the way it works. There's dozens of reasons, hundreds of reasons why your site could have been hit. So right now, we are building and have built some sites purely using the various tools. We've used Jasper, we're using OpenAI, we've used ChatGPT. We're thinking about running one of those stupid tests like you were talking about. Let's build a 45,000 page type site and see what happens. If there's a way to get penalized, 45,000 pages ought to be a way to get penalized, just to see, because we'll have those out there. And if Google actually does begin to penalize those things, I'll have multiple test points, data points, which will show that. But until that's the case, yeah, AI content is among the content production methods that we're using. And sometimes just straight out of whatever tool is just copy, paste, done. And it's ranking.
Yeah, and keep in mind that AI is not free. So, the API cost on a 45,000 page website, if you're using up, say, 3 cents per page in API units, which is probably reasonable. I would anticipate between 1 and 3 cents per page. That still ends up being, $1,350. So that's not nothing, especially for a test. That's an expensive test.
On
But
on an unrelated note, can I borrow your open AI account?
the other thing about AI technology is, you know, the thing that I find remarkable about it from a programming standpoint is it really feels like the best mentorships I've had in my career, when I've had, you know, somebody who was showing me the ropes on new development and was teaching me what to do. And it was really like that, but better, because this mentor knows all languages and all libraries and all aspects of all things. And this mentor has an unending supply of time for me.
Mhm.
And so, given that, I mean, this, you know, all by itself, just for that nature of it, I mean, it is incredible. What if I told you that you could have the most knowledgeable mentor and the thing you want to learn for free, and they will give you an unending amount of their time to help you? I mean, does that have any value? I mean, I think it's incredible. It's out of the gate, it's competing with some of the best mentors I've had in my career. And that is something. Like, I'm a little flabbergasted by it, because I mean, wow, that's where it really hits its mark well. And so if you want to learn to program, this is like the number one resource now. It's better than any other resource I've seen. So I'd say, you know, you could start with a YouTube tutorial, which was the previous winner, you know, and then move to Chat GPT for question and answer or learning more. But I'd be willing to bet that in the future, you're going to go to an AI to learn something new instead of going to YouTube. And so I think in that regard, YouTube needs to be a little bit worried, because one of their biggest categories of traffic draw could be replaced by AI. What do you think, Clint?
I don't know about replaced. I would say maybe less audience, because we all have different learning styles, right? So, and I definitely have benefited from learning more Python on ChatGPT than watching a YouTube video. But other people learn differently, so they could have that value added benefit on the YouTube side. But at the end of the day, the people that are saying that, or talking bad about ChatGPT and ChatGPT content on websites, or writers using AI to help to write their stuff, those are the guys that are also ironically promoting EAT, and they're also talking about content marketing and how that should be your number one SEO thing, and you shouldn't do backlinks. Those are the ones that are charging ungodly amount of money for junk trash articles. And now they're mad because business owners can go and buy probably higher quality articles for significantly less, and do it all on their own, and implement their $11,000 SEO campaigns that are based entirely on content marketing all by themselves.
Yeah. If you need an authoritative article on the different culinary ways you can use green peppers, I mean, that will cost you about 16 cents in AI.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the economies of things are gonna be turned upside down. And that's, to me, that's the scariest part, because that's where people are going to feel some pain, is when those economies collapse, because the values have shifted so dramatically. And so, yeah, I don't know what to expect in the world in terms of those impacts, but the technology itself is incredible.
Yeah.
And when people badmouth Chat GPT, I always want to see their prompts, because how you construct the prompt wildly impacts what you get out of the AI. And so if they don't know what they're doing on constructing the prompt, then, you know, I have to take it with a grain of salt. So share your prompts, or I may not believe your claims. And you should view that too. If somebody's making claims that an AI sucks, but they won't show you how they're using it, take it with a big grain of salt.
Also keep in mind, like if I do a prompt and if I do it on multiple topics, it's still going up all that previous output that it gave me and analyzing that to answer my neat question, which is why it works so good for learning code, because you can take it step by step by step, right? Referencing the side previous, referencing the previous, and the same works with the text generation stuff. So if you're asking a prompt and expect to, you know, let's clown Chat GPT because of this, oh, look how stupid it is, but you ignored all that other stuff that you asked it before you asked that new thing to make it look stupid. And that's just the nature of AI. So you can intentionally go in there and screw stuff up for yourself, make it look bad, or intentionally just screw stuff up for yourself when you're writing an article. If you forget that it is analyzing everything else that it did to create the new answers for you, it's learning on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I'm hoping that they come out with a version that's, you know, chat math for math and physics, you know. That would be awesome. And if you could interface the two to say, okay, now I want you to do calculations on text, because it really sucks at that right now. It'll give you wrong answers if you tell it to write a, you know, 600-word paragraph with 19 keyword mentions. It fails hard on that at the moment. So it does have limitations. Let's see. What interesting SEO problem are you struggling with right now except indexing? You know, there's a number of them. One of the ones I'm really struggling with right now is how to measure, you know, new whole categories of factors. And so there are things that I think are factors, and until I can measure, parse, quantify, it's hard to do the analysis to say that there is anything there. And so until we figure out those things, so one of the things I'm struggling with right now is I see in search these little helpful information snippets for certain search terms will be added to the search results. Like it'll tell you the benefits, it'll tell you the key features, it'll tell you the ingredients, it'll you know, there. And so these informational statements are the thing that I'm trying to quantify the most right now. And it's probably going to take an AI to be able to measure those things and quantify them. And so, yeah, I wonder if there's a way like I can take the current content of an article and say, parse out the informational statements of that article. Can an AI help me quantify these things? And so, yeah, that's kind of in the area I'm in now. What about you, Lee? What are some things you're trying to break into?
There are a few right now. Some deal with just scale, you know, certain problems at a scale, or certainly with large sites. Like if you have an e-com site that has 25,000 SKUs, you know, those sort of problems are a little different. But also things like, you know, redirects, canonicals, things like that. Exactly what do they do? Because there's a lot of different ways of accomplishing what looks like a same thing. You know, how does Google treat them differently? What is it? What's actually going on behind the scenes? Because those are useful pieces, but they're not easy questions to design tests for.
We have a follow-up question. Is helpful content all about internal linking? I don't know the mind of Google and I haven't seen their source code, but the most meaningful change I saw appear after that update was these informational statements. So if you go and search for nutrition supplements, you'll occasionally see results that parse out these informational statements in the search results. And those have my curiosity right now. So I'm not going to definitively state what a Google update is or isn't, but the evidence I have is that it's kind of looking at these informational statements because they showed up in the search results. So that's kind of the evidence I'm working with. Could it be about internal linking, or part of it at least? I mean, maybe, I don't know, but I don't have any evidence for that.
I think that may be in reference to the other day in Signals Lab, Ian Evans posted something he was starting to see. It was limited. I reached out to him. His data is limited, but it's interesting enough that it bears inspection, which is he'd noticed on sites, some of his own, that pages that we normally say is like silo pages, supporting pages that are basically orphans, and they exist to boost up whatever your target page is, your target terms. Those pages tend to not index, or they index and then get thrown out fairly quickly. So he looked at internal linking, and if you don't care enough about your page to give it some internal love and stuff like that, he hypothesized that that may be part of what helpful content is if your page is designed just to bolster another page, it's not particularly helpful. And those pages tend not to have internal links.
Yeah, see, I'd argue that topically, that sounds more like a link spam rule set than something about the helpfulness of the content itself. And so there was also a recent link spam update. And so, thoughts come to my mind that, is he labeling part of the link spam update as part of the helpful content?
Yeah.
But honestly, I don't officially know what's in either. So it's all just kind of blind guesswork from the outside looking in.
Yeah.
It's nice to see Signals Lab finally catch up. How long have I been saying that? Right. So I think that's more of because you talked about this, Ted, Google just essentially looking for ways to use less resources to index and categorize the internet. And to me, I don't think that orphan page theory is related to link spam. I think it's more, I want an easy ways to go, what would be quality content? And if a webmaster puts a piece of content on their website and doesn't link to it from anywhere else, is it really quality? If they don't think it's quality, then why should we think it's quality? And to me, that would be like the easiest way to engineer how to keep your index clean. If you don't bother, if you have orphan pages and they're not indexed, it's because you're not linking to them, because you're saying, hey, Google, I don't think this is important enough to link to for my own website, but here's this content. And they're like, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I mean, that's to me, that's easy.
Yeah, I always like to frame things based on the scale. So if you're out there with the website wondering how the system works, just keep in mind that at this point, Google is probably aware of about 400 trillion URLs that are live. And for the system to work, their algorithm needs to say no to nearly all of them.
Right.
So, there's, statistically about 0% of the web is actually keyword searchable. So just know where the bar is, and you gotta be better than the vast majority. And fortunately, the vast majority of those pages, they're total garbage. Of course, they're never gonna rank.
Right.
So, but the problem is spam 2.0 is gonna be different. They're not gonna be that type of garbage anymore. As people adopt AI and it gets cheaper and faster, the nature of spam will change, and that's one of the unknown scary things. So when people say, "Oh, SEO is in danger because of AI," not at this point in time, maybe down the road. But who's in danger right now is search engines. What's Google going to do when the quality of spam goes sharply up? And I bet they don't have good answers for that.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that the concept is plausible, and it's something that would allow them to restrict indexing or crawling, using data that they already have. They could it could be a partial solution to their scale problem. So while Ian didn't have a ton of data on it, it was certainly plausible, and it certainly bears discussion and investigation, because it does solve a lot of scale problems. Now, whether it's whether it would, if it were in action, whether it's a quality content thing or a spam thing, yeah, who cares? It's is it accurate? Is it measurable? Is it usable or not?
Yep. We have another question from Dental Marketing Guy, the revered sponsor of Confessions of an SEO podcast. He asks, what's the most generic keyword or keywords to include in a domain name for this new wave of chat GPT related businesses? I would, if you want to future proof, my current advice is the word prompt, because all these AIs, all the Da Vinci ones, all the image generation ones, they all work with prompts. The thing they have in common is prompts. And so when new AIs come out, if you want to be agnostic of which one, I think you want to focus on the word prompt. So if you add, easy prompts or amazing prompts or cool prompts or AI prompts, I think prompts is the right term if you want to be broadly applicable as the market changes. AI would be the other one because they all are, AI. But chat GPT is, very niche down into one implementation that, may not even be the implementation 3 years from now. So if you invested heavily in chat GPT domains, I don't know the longevity of that. And it definitely would hurt you if you got into, image or audio prompts or things of that nature. What do you think, Lee?
I agree with that. I would throw content and content synonyms in that mix as well, because content can be written, it can be audio, it can be a lot of different things. So I would throw those in there as well, because again, that's generic and it's agnostic to the technology that exists today and the technological developments to come. So
let's see. You have 5 minutes with Google search engineering team who can give a detailed answer to your any questions. What will you ask? I'd have to think about that. I've actually had that dream come true on a couple occasions. One of which was at an SMX conference, which is kind of known for being content dead on SEO information. But the Google engineers often present there. So I was at the Paul Har one when he did his famous How Search Works video. I was in the audience that day. And I got to talk to him for a few minutes after the show. And surprisingly, he did have to look over at Gary before answering my questions, but Gary would give him the nod and then he'd tell me the answer. And he gave me some very informative answers with, how they're using Open Graph data. So Open Graph was brand new at the time. So I was wondering how they're using it, which parts they were using, things of that nature. And at the time, he gave remarkably clear answers, but it took a nod from Gary for him to do it. So yeah, I would definitely ask about helpful content right now. I think that, what the hell is it? I would definitely ask questions about how they intend to integrate, AI and to surface it to the public. I'd want to know what their next move is. And I kind of know what it is. I think they're probably seeing a lot of evangelists jump ship, and they probably want to win those evangelists back because they know what those evangelists did in the early days of Google. And the last thing you want to do is lose all your evangelists, because that's how you become Lycos. So, they're gonna pivot. Just how, I want to know what they're doing. What do you think, Clint? What would you ask Google?
I think I'd be more interested in their competitors to OpenAI and what they're doing with that kind of stuff, because clearly they got a larger database of information to teach the bots, right? So to teach the AI. So I'd be more interested to see what they could do with it and how they could turn that into something useful for everybody.
Yeah, speaking of scale, like we know that AI has had on the order of, hundreds of millions of dollars invested into it. But keep in mind that Google is a corporation that can throw billions at a problem. So in terms of a resource fight, it's reasonable to think that Google could outperform. But the question I have is that scale also works against you. They're already so big and slow. Can they pivot? Can they respond? Can they do pivots well? Because not doing pivots well can be catastrophic too. And frankly, even on little pivots like updating Search Console, they tend to face plan a lot on those. So confidence isn't high that they'll pivot fast and gracefully. But I would expect a pivot. What do you think, Lee? What would you ask them?
I'd ask for the schema for the structure of their data warehouse. That would be it. I just want to know what data they're collecting. I'll figure out the rest from there.
Why not just ask for a copy of the algorithm?
Because that changes. The data warehouse doesn't. That's the thing.
Yeah. Okay. That's a good one. That's a good one. Yeah, you want to find their information architect and get them drunk at the hotel bar.
Exactly. There's where you get all the secrets. Everybody else is trying to back into these answers and are they collecting it or not? What are all the things? And I know it's enormous, but if you cluster it, even with the structure of a data warehouse, you sit there and say, hey, this is our traffic warehouse. This is our, web, this is our image warehouse. Or however it's structured tells you a lot about how they process their information and what goes into the algorithm.
Yep.
So where are they being efficient is where they're, what they care about.
If the top 5 competitors have an average of 3 H2s and 3 H3s, but Cora tells me to make a 2.5K word article, what would you do? Well, keep in mind that those are different measurements. So if the average recipe, if the average cookie recipe wanted a tablespoon of cinnamon, but the average recipe online wants a pound of beef. You got to kind of get more specific about what's going on. So did that 2.5 come from the competitors? Did it come from the page one average, or did it come from the shared average? Because if you're in a low to no competition niche and it's pulling information from the shared average because you have no SEO pressure to cause factors to have a signal, then in those cases, you're getting good advice from the field that isn't directly applicable to what your competition is doing. The other thing is a lot of people make the mistake of directly competing with amount of content, and that is one thing you can do, but you often don't need to. So if your competitors are doing 30 linear feet of vertical scrolling, you can often come in with a 5,000 word article tuned to a higher keyword density and beat those skyscrapers. So you don't have to compete on amount of content if your other metrics are more competitive. The other problem with competing with amount of content is when you explode the size of your word count, you often explode the amount of tuning work you need to do as well. And so if you want to minimize the amount of work you're doing, there's a lot to be said to competing with amount of content last. Try to win first with a smaller page, and if that doesn't work out, you could always change the strategy. And a lot of things people don't realize when they get a Quora report is you set the priorities. So if there are things that are really hard to do, or the client just doesn't want, or you don't want to start out of the gate with, say, I won't say no, but I don't need to try those first. So let's try other stuff and see where we get to, and we can always revisit the difficult spots later if we need to. Let's see. What do you think, Lee?
Yeah, I think, people don't realize that was one of the things I always tell people is like, you're the one that set the tuning recommendations, and they're like, what? That's the first thing they don't really realize they have control over. And the second thing is that, Quora is not a sentient system. It's a measurement system. And if you look, I'll use this example for local. On page one, if you've got 4 directories and 6 local sites, the directories will all have, 150 H2s. The local sites all have 8. So it'll tell you need to add, 140 something more, H2s to your page. But if you're not understanding the composition of the SERP and the where the recommendation is coming from, you're building a Franken page that's not going to be a directory. It's not going to be content. It's going to be hard to do and largely come out badly. So you do have to apply some thought to accepting any recommendation from any tool or person for that matter.
Yeah, and another thing I think a lot of people do in SEO is they assume that the only way SEO can be applied is to the main content, and they instantly start, injecting words into the primary article that was written to help convert visitors. And so it can be transformative if you realize that quality content is for human beings to convert with some call to action. And SEO content speaks to algorithms about how a page should be positioned. And it's kind of almost better if those two things stay in their own lane. The fact that you try to merge them into one, that was never a requirement. You can, and most SEOs do try to do that, but I don't think it's optimal. You can have supplemental content that carries the SEO weight. You can have it be in your navigation where most of the SEO weight. You can have a mega footer that carries most of the SEO weight. You could You could have information boxes that are there if you want them, that do most of the SEO work. It doesn't always have to be in your main article. And it's, I find it's almost easier and better if your main content that speaks to humans and your SEO, they stay apart and stay in their own lane.
Yeah, you talk about a lot of times minimum viable SEO, and that aligns with a question that I often ask when I'm looking at a SERP. You look at what's the max number of words on page one, or what's the average, or whatever it is. I'm like, okay, so how did the dude with 650 words get into page one? What is it that they did that allowed them to do it? Because a lot of times you can find that I don't need 2,500 words. They got there somehow, some way. Could be they're on page, could be they're off page. But, if you're looking at what it is that you need to do to compete, you also need to look at the minimum sometimes.
Yeah. One of my favorite examples, and you'll see this happen on a niche by niche basis. One of my favorite examples is the keyword games. And you go and look at the number one result for the keyword games, like zoom way out and look at the whole page. Visually, it has almost no text. And for a page that visually has no text, they managed to use their exact match keyword almost, 700-800 times. So you can rank, and it doesn't have to be a skyscraper article. There are different ways to rank a page.
Yeah.
What do you think, Clint?
I don't really have anything else to add. You guys pretty much beat that one down.
All right. Let's see. I think that's all the questions. Yep, so we'll end it there. I know we're 20 over. So thank you, Carolyn, for giving us the update on indexing. Be sure to check out her podcast, Confessions of an SEO. It comes out Friday mornings. They're short and sweet, 15-minute episodes, so check them out. And we'll see you next week. So Lee, how's the training going? I know there's a lot of interest in your next round. Is there any thoughts on when that'll be?
Yeah, that's February 8th is the next one. So people need to reach out to me on Skype, just ping me. It's my Skype handle's Testedall. You can go to testedseotraining.com to see the current information on it. So yeah, we're gearing up for the next one. And from the people that I've got in there thus far, it looks like it's going to be a really fun group. I can't wait for February 8th to get here.
And just for the general public, this training is not for everyone. So don't be surprised if the website is going to try to convince you not to do it. That's on purpose.
Yes.
But, if you're interested in seeing what it's all about, go check it out. The testimonials, you'll probably see a lot of familiar faces. All right. Take care, everyone.